Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe free of bullshit and full of bold solutions. That's what the No BS Marketing Show is all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Carol Washington of Life's Work Pittsburgh. But first, let's cut the bullshit. And Carol's going to weigh in on this for sure. Why is it that we view nonprofit fundraising and nonprofit marketing, and we either go one way or the other? And let me say what I mean. What I mean is that if a nonprofit doesn't brand well, we don't know about them, and we don't think they're worthy of our time and our resources and our donations. But if a nonprofit has a good brand, and maybe they're really good at making their brand work with a shoestring budget, many people perceive it as they don't need our help. They're big. They don't need our donation of time or money. Carol, have you run into that much?
Absolutely. I've been in nonprofit or exposed to it for the past 20 years. And it's quite different walking into the room with the United Way logo on your sleeve versus a smaller nonprofit, and smaller meaning North Shore Community Alliance. Not sure if you've even heard of it. I tell my staff when we are, publicizing for a fundraising event that marketing can be viewed as a can of Pepsi. It is the label that's wrapped around the cola. Cola is cola. If it's really cold and you hear that when you open it up, that's the part that you have to sell. It's the freshness. It's the reliability. It's the, if it's cheap, somehow if you put a dollar amount to something, it devalues it. I can say with all confidence and assurance that the services that we provide are priceless. We are going into situations just in terms of all of the nonprofits I've been exposed to. We're in situations that the average person does not want to be in. You're servicing a person that doesn't want to be served or doesn't realize they need the services that we're providing. How do you sell that? And when you're living in a time where you are dependent on state and federal funding, you go through quite a long period and a lull where you are spending your cash reserve. So when you go on campaigns, so to speak, it's much more easily to recognize a YWCA, a Boys and Girls Club, just to name a few of larger organizations that people have pet projects. Oh, I went to the Boys and Girls Club, or I grew up swimming at the Y, so that's where they want to give. When you want to try to redirect someone's dollars, the difficult part is to convince them that your services are just as good. So I get frustrated in that, we have a line item on our large and strategic plan and budget stating that it's earmarked for marketing, but those opportunities tend to shrink, when things like grants don't come through, when, state budgets aren't passed in a timely manner. So yeah, I get really frustrated. I'm really glad I can say the word bullshit right now, because that's what it feels like from a leader's perspective. And when we're challenged to say, don't you recognize my logo? And they're saying, where are you from? And, the North Shore Community Alliance had existed for 120 years. Life's Work has existed for over 90 years. But unless you need and tap into our services, you may not even know we exist.
It does come down to a number of different things. I think subconsciously, sometimes we, meaning all of us, when we're asked to donate, we subconsciously look to find an excuse. So whenever someone says that UPMC is too big, or the YMCA of Pittsburgh is just for Pittsburgh, or I don't even know what the North Shore Alliance is, those are all sometimes legitimate excuses, but often they're just subconscious stalls or objections, just like in any sales situation. So that's some of the BS where we just don't admit that, like, nah, I just don't want to donate. Right. And then the other piece is when we get frustrated saying that someone's got a good brand or has built a good brand, and we imply that that means they shouldn't get your time or resources. That's also bullshit. But I do have to call out every company in the world too, because we all have to do a better job of doing real marketing. And we're going to talk about how you've done that with small budgets and small nonprofits that are making a difference, because a lot of people are in nonprofits and they don't understand marketing.
Right.
And they don't understand that it starts with marketing intel and it starts with hit the bullseye targeting. So you narrow down who you want to reach to ask and make the ask, and that you have to have a systematic way to build the brand and make the ask.
Absolutely.
And I found that to be my source of frustration is I'll talk to small nonprofits and sometimes they're so concerned about getting sweat equity, getting me to do an in-kind donation that they miss the point.
Yes.
And they miss the point that I'll still give you strategic in-kind donation.
Right.
But I'm not going to go do the tactical because that's money out of my pocket. But I can sit here as the CEO of Mass Solutions and work with you on some strategy
Absolutely.
that I will give you as an in-kind. And they kind of go,
Yeah.
And then what do? I walk away saying, A, you don't get it, and B, you basically insulted me.
Yes.
So now you're over here in that box, and I've got a bunch of other nonprofits I can talk to.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of where I was coming from with there's bullshit all around with the respect to that if you're a person being asked to invest and asked to give time and you think they have enough money because they have a good brand, that's BS. If you're the person that doesn't know the brand and uses that as an excuse, learn a little more. Maybe you'll feel good about giving back. So don't use that BS. And then if you're the nonprofit, don't just think that the donation of tactical is what you need. You need to listen to strategic when you get a chance to get it.
Absolutely. And I think consumed would be the word from the nonprofit side, trying to make the person understand that this isn't widgets. This is human lives we're talking about, and it's permanent, effective change. So if you can put that into a visual for someone that may not have the ability to come in and see, we have a workshop. We employ over 150 persons with disability in our shop on Forbes Avenue. And once you see it, you get it. But if I'm out of town, if I'm speaking at a conference or I'm a keynote and I have to paint a picture, that picture has to look like I've had some type of marketing exposure in order to make you realize how important it is. Mm-hmm. Now, some people give because they have a person in their family with disabilities. Some people give because their family member might have worked for us at one point in time. Unless you need us, in some instances, you don't know we exist, we being nonprofits. A part of me says bullshit because organizations like this have to exist. We do food pantries, we do clothing drives, we do, the four basic essentials of life: food, clothing, shelter, and employment. And without these things, that's part of my pitch when I'm selling it to a larger crowd, is that, so give nothing. The day you need it is the day I call bullshit because you knew we existed before and now you're wanting others to give, So I'm torn when it comes to, I have my favorite nonprofits that I give to in addition to my agency, but IUP is just always going to get a donation from me as an alum. And I know they're probably going to call me when I get out of here. But I say that, if you've taken advantage of the School of Eberty, just to tie it into an educational, that's nonprofit as well. You can't touch it, see it, or feel it until you get the degree in your hand. You realize just how valuable it is when you graduate. But that's just like any other nonprofit. Hospitals are nonprofits. So again, if you look at them from a different set of eyes, and a good friend of mine would say, look at it with your good eye, and pay attention to what exactly you're given to. Know where your dollars are going. When we throw golf outings and the real galas and real pretty things to go to and fun things to go to, but the purpose of it, you can't let it ever miss. So you repeat it over and over again, so that not only do they want to come back to that event because they had a good time, but they remember what your mission is for.
Exactly. The No Bullshit Marketing Show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. Try a book like Modern Romance, an investigation from the hilarious Aziz Ansari. You can download it for free today. Go to audibletrial.com/nobs. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. You heard a little bit from her already. Our guest today is Carol Washington, the Chief Operating Officer of Life's Work Pittsburgh. Carol, officially welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You started getting right into it. I loved it. It was during the Cut the BS rant. You jumped in and threw out some great points, and you talked a little bit about Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Let's start by having you walk us through your educational background and your career journey.
Okay. I usually tell people I can say this in 2 minutes or 20 minutes, but I'll keep it short.
We'll go somewhere in between.
Okay. Educational journey. Again, IUP chose me, I'd like to say, because of what I looked into. Didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up as a freshman. I knew I wanted to go to a 4-year institution, and I fell in love with the School of Business, which became Eberly College, and knew I wanted to be in some facet of corporate. That was my first notion. Along the way, I got addicted to the independence of it and said to myself, what do you mean you're not going to call me and wake me up, Mom? And what do you mean I don't have to go to class? Just show up for the midterm and the final. I love that theory when freshmen think that they're bright enough to get away without studying. And that comes ever clearer when that report card goes home before you go on break. My mother reminded me of that often, living in the shadow of a sister who was extremely bright, on a roll, bookworm, chess club, one of those kind of sisters. So I tried to be the opposite. And I wanted to be so, independent. That's why I chose such a large school for myself. Coming from a small community, what I got in the end was more leadership skills than I ever imagined. What I got in the end was an opportunity to join ROTC, take advantage of the School of Business, work for the provost. During my work study, speaking of boot camps of life, the provost just exposed us to professional etiquette, the soft skills that you need to learn when you're segueing from one culture to another. Speaking of, really didn't like accounting. And I say that because my first job was an accountant for Mellon Bank before it was BNY. And we did 401 analyzations and all these complicated figures, and I really looked inside this cube. I felt like a mouse who needed its cheese moved, not to be, no pun intended, but I needed to figure out what I still wanted to be because that wasn't it. I stumbled upon an opportunity working with Thrift Drug, which became Eckerd, which is now Rite Aid. Very complicated journey when it comes to pharmaceutical retail, but I had an opportunity to get into their finance department, which exposed me to just a different level of business. And it was from an analytical perspective, which clearly I wasn't ready for at the time, just didn't know it. The company decided to merge, and we as managers had to interview as if we were coming from the outside. So talk about bullshit. That's what I felt like. It was an opportunity for the company to see what talent they had inside. But, we didn't look at it that way. We felt as if we were fighting for our jobs all over again.
We'll talk about that for a second. So was someone who was a peer and a colleague then a competitor?
Absolutely. And it was a different environment. I mean, Thrift Drug was ran as a mom and pop operation. You didn't leave. This is how mom and pop it was. You didn't leave on Christmas until you got a hug and your check from the president of the company. When we merged, it became a corporate conglomerate. I mean, our headquarters was in Clearwater, Florida. So you didn't even know who the president was. We were panel interviewed by attorneys, which was a grueling process. Didn't see it as a learning experience until it was over. We got to the other side of it. But during that process, I went to IUP. I always tell people that I went to IUP, meaning to myself, I am bold. I am aggressive. I know what it takes to get to the other side. And I walked up to a VP and I said, I'm pretty pissed that we have to go through this process, but I still want a job. And he says, well, and I said, in fact, I want your job. And this is real ballsy, so I wouldn't tell anyone to do this. But he says, well, what do you think I do? I said, you control someone else's fate. And he looked at me and he said, you belong in HR. There went my, who knew from then, probably 8+ years in human resources, which was a phenomenal journey into the other side of things. And, just because you think you want something, be careful what you wish for. Because being on that other side, I also got to experience telling someone that they're going to be laid off. Being neutral when it came to a union environment, being a part of upper management and not being able to make friends. You have to be very gray, but it was a very real experience and a good segue to becoming a leader in nonprofit. because then I was surrounded by human beings. And that was the product, was servicing human beings from that moment forward. And so for the past 18 years, we're fast forwarding now, I entered into the North Shore Community Alliance, which was the company that merged with Life's Work.
And what did the North Shore Community Alliance do? What was your mission?
We focused on servicing families in home that were in crisis. And crisis could mean that a child is born in an addictive environment, or the house is deplorable, all media and newsworthy type of stories, children, youth, and families, which is service from the Department of Human Services. They would go in first. They're the first line of defense on behalf of the welfare of the child. They, in turn, call an agency like North Shore Community Alliance, who is labeled a crisis provider. We come in, we're the good cops in this scenario, and we tell the families, unless you work with us over the next 30 to 90 days, you may be in jeopardy of losing your child. You may be in jeopardy of losing your home. So that is what is, quote unquote, labeled a crisis. While we're with the families, though, we had an opportunity to provide food, exposure to career exploration. We had emergency shelter, still have an emergency shelter that we own, and we are constantly engaged with the family along the journey towards repair. And it was a really nice natural mission to blend with Life's Work, because they service persons with disabilities and other barriers to employment. So again, a good blending of two missions.
Well, tell me how that all took place when you decided to, you were the executive director, so you and your board decided to merge with Life's Work. Walk through that, because that had to be an incredible learning experience with some ups and downs.
No, and it's funny you should say that, because that in itself was a really long 2 years, and it takes two boards of two different organizations to vote unanimously on such a large undertaking of a merge. The company we were merging with, Life's Work, was significantly larger in budget. They were $6.3 million plus. We were a measly $2.3 million and some change. And we had a significantly smaller board. So we walked in with a board of 9. They had around 22 members at the time. So to convince them that it was the right thing to do, myself and the president at the time went through a period of exploration before we even brought it to their attention that it was a great idea. We crunched numbers. You have to reveal everything about yourself. It's almost like getting married. It's, in the sense that you need to divulge things about you that may not be pleasant, some audits that might not have gone so well, but then you begin to share success stories and outcomes that are true and real, and exploit the best side of you, And so it was bittersweet to, think in one side of my brain thinking, am I letting the agency down by tucking it underneath? But then the other side of our brain said, no, you're doing the right thing, because you're salvaging the name. So it's still called the North Shore Community Alliance, but it is a division of Life's Work. We still have an active contract with the Department of Human Services. So it was kind of like, it was my baby. And it was something that I had spent the large part of my professional leadership career molding to what I thought was perfection. And not that I couldn't learn anything else, but it was really nice to, and it hasn't come to an end yet, because it's still, alive and well, but we landed safe. And it was probably one of the most rigorous business decisions that I've ever been involved in.
That's Carol Washington, Chief Operating Officer of Life's Work, and I'm Dave Mastovich, host of the No Bullshit Marketing Show. Carol, other than family, who are your mentors and how have they impacted you?
I've had quite a few mentors. When you are a young leader, you begin to seek mentors you think that are purposeful for that scenario. So whether it's making a decision like, I don't know, what's my next gig going to be? I'm tired of accounting. I want to go somewhere else. Or I need to update my resume. What do I look like on paper? That's a different type of and level of mentoring. And I got a lot of my early leadership mentoring from a gentleman by the name of Derek Wilson. Derek Wilson, shout out to him. He owns the Wilson Group that provides business solutions from a technology perspective. He'd be real proud that I learned that tagline. And he became, we've known each other almost 30 years, but he became the chairperson of my board. One, because of our relationship. Two, because he literally grew up in the center that I was leading. And three, because he's probably one of the most brilliant entrepreneurs I've ever met. And he started his business by himself with nothing. And he just gave me tough love when it came to candid feedback that I needed as a young leader. Now, fast forward as a seasoned leader, Deborah Valentine Gray, who is currently working for Indiana University of Pennsylvania. She is the the director of regional advancement for IUP in the downtown location. And Deborah exposed me as a mature leader, the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And, I'm still green, as seasoned as I am, but I still have a lot to learn. And she taught me that a sponsor is a person who speaks on your behalf when you're not in the room and can, spew your business and professional accolades to get you into a different arena. Just in whether it's gifting, building a new donor base, having a speaking engagement, or having an opportunity like this to be on your show, and allowing yourself to blossom when you're not around. And I pride myself on the fact that I have quite a few mentors that I want to segue into that sponsorship type relationship. But it's a wonderful space to be in, to know that you still have someone that happens to be connected to my alumni that will constantly expose me to the school at Everly anytime I want to. And I had the opportunity to have breakfast with Dean Camp based on that relationship. So, mentors aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to be known in your life and be connected. But, you get what you need and you move on professionally. And you'll know when you've outgrown the mentor, or they'll tap you on the shoulder and say, now it's time for me to introduce you to someone else.
I agree. Mentors make a lasting impact on your life, pretty much forever. But I agree with you. Sometimes you see mentor relationships grow to where you become, they still are a valuable friend, yes, but you've kind of grown to where you're both doing the same type of thing and you've matured. So you still remember them as a mentor and the impact that they had. And now there's a great deal of respect and they're like a friend or a peer. And then you pick up different ones for different reasons throughout your life.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate the loyalty that you have to the places that you've worked. And you've mentioned IUP a number of times and how much you've worked with Dean Camp and how much you give back to IUP. And I think it's impressive and I'm happy to see that. But now I get to put you on the spot and have you be a little bit vulnerable. Talk about a learning experience when maybe you were the BS employee, a tough boss, or your communication was not what it needed to be. Looking back, when do you think you might have been guilty of some BS?
Besides the BS I displayed when I had the nerve to ask the VP for his job, I would say with same company, the woman's name, I hope she can hear this at some point, what an impact she made. Her name was Jan Meikle. She was the only female vice president for Thrift Drug, and I was enamored about a woman that could stand in a room full of men and have the same respect. She was tough. And I was a business analyst at the time for pharmaceutical retail. So it was a lot of numbers crunching. And she asked me for a report. I was the newbie. I was the youngest person on the team. And I turned in a report, which I thought was stellar. I spent a lot of time on it. I went to, Beverly School of Business. I knew, I had an IUP degree. So I was a little cocky. And she marked it up with a red pen. And I think I have a phobia. My staff knows that I have a phobia of red pens that really ripped it apart. And I walked away defeated, resubmitted it a day or so later, and she marked it up again. And the third time or fourth, I can't remember at this point, I was so frustrated. I wanted to be a smart butt and turn it back in its original form just to see if she knew the difference, because it became an unspoken battle of wits at that point. She summoned me to her office. She took her glasses off, asked me to have a seat. Here's me thinking, okay, here's a pink slip coming. She said, good for you. And I said, I'm sorry. And she said, I only wanted you to defend what you originally put in front of me. You gave me no feedback when I ripped your report apart. You didn't even seem offended. You didn't seem like you were learning anything from those critiques. So yes, was it a redundant lesson? It was necessary. It was necessary for my character. It took that chip off my shoulder, and it allowed me to say, I know what kind of boss I don't want to be. And I pride myself in being now Josh may not agree with that because Josh is
here for the show. He's another IUP grad. So we got 3 IUP grads in the room. He's by far the youngest, and he's an alum from the recent years, and he's your director of marketing. And
he is in an interesting part of his career. And he is actually in our recruitment and marketing department. But he knows I will give him honest feedback. I think he would agree with that. I think he would also agree with the fact that you don't always get a second time to make that first impression. So make it good, make it honest, and defend it. If you have a point, I'll listen. If you're wrong, I'm still going to tell you you're wrong if I have a different opinion. And if we fail, then I'm going to take some ownership on that. So yeah, I could be pretty, especially when we're in a time crunch, or we are in a fundraising crunch, or we have to, he's a recruiter of our educational programs. If those classes aren't filled, he knows there's only one person I'm going to look at. There's not a team behind him. I always view my leadership style as a coach, though. I love football. So I'm not a Rooney. I'm a Tomlin. I'm on the field. And yeah, I rip my headphones off sometimes, throw them on the ground and say, why aren't we getting further ahead? But I got enough Super Bowl rings on my hand to show that we can do this every time. And we can get back up, dust ourselves off. And, so I'm going left, but no BS.
There you go. What a great story about the learning from your boss. What did you say was Jan Meikle?
Jan Meikle.
Jan Meikle. I messed up both syllables. Jan Meikle. Okay, so we'll get that on the show notes. Jan Meikle, and that was pretty cool leadership on her part. So how do you convey that? You said you don't want to be a certain kind of boss, and you're probably like a player's coach type leader. Mm-hmm. How do you do a similar type of mentoring to people that work for you?
Well, I've had the experience, I won't say the luxury, but I've had the experience of being managed in several different styles, and one being dictatorship. And I really despise someone that barks orders and does not understand what it's like to be in the field any longer, or is so far disconnected from the person we're serving or the product itself in terms of the mission. I take pride in the fact that I know every last one of my employees, if they're married, their significant other. I know how many children they have. I also know the over 150 disabled employees that we service in-house, and the majority of their caregivers. I know their behaviors. And that to me is a little more important because it has everything to do with the bottom line. If I'm going to ask my employees to do something, they understand that I've done it before. I know exactly how long it takes. I know how much compassion it takes to service a person with any disability, how much humility it takes. So again, from a coach's perspective, in relation to, again, I'm going to use my football example. If you wouldn't hire a coach that never played football before. So in my ability to mentor others, I would not want to elevate that person to an arena that they don't have a story to tell, or they've never lived a part of that mission that they're about to expect of someone else.
Hear more of my interview with Carol Washington on part 2 of the No Bullshit Marketing Show, brought to you by Mass Solutions. It's all about bold solutions